Gentlemen, from Emily and I and everyone here at X&Y Communications, we want to wish you the merriest Christmas and the happiest of New Year's to come. And to show our appreciation for you, man, 17 years of doing this show, I'm giving you a gift card worth $20, not 20% off, $20 that you can spend like cash at the X&Y Communications store. Just go to mountaintop.podcast.com/gift card and get you some. That's our gift to you. Just use the code giftcard20 at checkout to use your $20 gift card. And now here comes one of those episodes that makes you think with my good friend from Canada, Delora Guignon.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X&Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, how's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am your host, Scott McKay, and you can find me on social media at Scott McKay on X, on Truth Social, on TikTok, and on YouTube, and at Real Scott McKay on Instagram and on Threads. The website is, as always, mountaintoppodcast.com. And gentlemen, go ahead and join the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. We're looking for you there. We got a great group of guys who are talking masculinity, getting better with women, and having a whole lot of fun doing it. My returning guest today is Delora Guignon. She is the mindset mentor, and she's from Ottawa, Canada, or more specifically, the surrounding vicinity of Ottawa, Canada. And today we're talking about what masculine energy looks like to women. Delora, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, you sound like you're in such a great mood. You have such a sunny disposition.
Thank you. Well, that's great. I am in a great mood, and it's sunny here, so that's probably part of it.
Yeah, well, considering the weather up there and how it's probably significantly colder already this time of year than it is here, hey, a little warmth, a little sunshine goes a long way, right?
Yeah, that's so true. We're having exceptionally warm weather, unusual right now. So I'm soaking it up. I get outside as much as I can.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's just starting to cool down here. And after all those days in a row of 100 degrees over the summer, you know, a little 50 degrees here, a little 55 degrees there, it works out pretty well here, but it's not ever going to get real cold here ever. So
that's lovely.
But hey, anyway, enough about me, right? Let's talk about today's awesome topic. And I use the word awesome very sparingly in this life, but in the true sense, trying to cover the subject of what masculine energy looks like to women, I think it's going to leave us a little bit in awe because as men, I think it's hard for us to put ourselves inside the female brain and understand how our sexual energy, our masculine energy looks to women, how it comes off to them, and how it energizes them. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You and I were talking briefly about the difference between masculinity and femininity and masculine energy and feminine energy. So just to level set up front, Delora, where are you coming from when it comes to those ideas?
Yeah, that's a really great distinction. Masculinity is, the human experience in your masculine form. That has its own definition, and femininity, and it's a social construct, obviously, also, depending on where you live and how femininity is seen and imposed on, the either or is how it's going to show up. So we can leave that as that. But masculine and feminine energy are energies available to all of us, and we have it inside, but there's a range. So, someone who is strong and feels really comfortable in their masculine energy, it could still be a female. So it has nothing to do with gender per se, even though masculinity and femininity may, but it's more the energy of it. And, when this is deep diving into the spiritual world, but what they say when you get to ascension or when you understand the ethereal, when the veil is lifted, you understand both masculine and feminine energy and you can flow with both. So I'll give you an example. If I paint a lot, I love to create, and that's more life energy. So when you tap into your more life energy, it's your creative energy, it's your charismatic energy, it's your sexual energy. It's why we are not meant to truly be, we're meant to be grateful, but not necessarily satisfied, because that's how expansion and growth and new ideas happen. Well, just because I'm creative and I'm female doesn't mean a man can't also have that creativity, but that will be his feminine energy. That doesn't make him feminine. It just means that he may, be able to flow with ideas. They don't have to come through logically. Okay, I have a problem. Let me solve it. Here's two ways, which, the creative side allows you to tap into your imagination, which is, it may be an idea that has never occurred to someone before. Like Ford making the V8 engine into one block. He insisted for 2 years that that was possible and paid engineers, I don't know how much, to come up with it. And it had never been done. They tried to tell him it couldn't be done. He insisted. Well, that more life energy is available to both of us. We need the masculine energy, the healed masculine energy, to give us the logic, the structure, the points, the protection, the safety, in order to let those ideas flow. So, for example, if I'm truly my feminine energy and I'm just flowing through the world, well, those are the days that I'm not necessarily paying attention to the danger around me, because I feel safe to just flow and just, my ideas sound crazy. They don't seem connected. I might spin around and dance. I may fall on the floor. Like, that's true feminine flowy energy. And I don't want, like, that is one aspect of it, because I don't want to sound like you're airy fairy floaty and as a feminine energy and you don't have any structure and logic. That's, again, we need both. However, when the masculine energy is there and the feminine feels safe, that's where you can have, and this is when we're talking about two different people, but that's when we can have the true exchange of those energies. But inside of ourselves, if a man doesn't feel safe to express himself or be creative, or not always be logical and always have to know the truth and the answer and have the way, then he's not going to be open to new ideas. He's not necessarily going to have all the compassion. Well, that is the unhealed masculine showing up, just like the unhealed feminine is. So the unhealed masculine energy and the unhealed feminine energy. And when you see it in 4 quadrants like that, it's a really great contrast. And it allows words to just kind of say, okay, this is what it means. So when you are able to understand the beauty of having access to both sides of these energy, and understanding how someone who shows up predominantly in their feminine energy to be recognized by someone in their healed masculine is, I mean, that, you want to talk about sexy. That is sexy. It's beautiful. Sparks fly, and it doesn't have to be sexual always, but just creative ideas come to life. Someone will have an idea and the way to get it done will suddenly show up. There's just an ebb and flow that naturally happens when that energy is healthily expressed with whoever's in the room.
Okay, well, what you're saying is incredibly interesting to me, and I'm going to go ahead and disclose the lion's share of why I find it so interesting up front. I don't expect you to have listened to a whole lot of these shows, Delora. I know you're a returning guest, and you know that my audience is almost all men, and a lot of these guys have listened to a lot of these shows. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you raised a few eyebrows a bit when you were talking about masculine and feminine energy, because they were like, oh, McKay's not going to agree with her. He's not going to like what she's saying at all. He completely disagrees. Finally, a show where he's going to have a piece of his guest and not agree with her at all. Well, sorry, gentlemen, but I'm not going to completely indulge that fantasy for you right now. I actually agree with your end result, Delora, but I indeed would have a different interpretation of how we got there. And if you don't mind, I'd love to share that. These guys know my storyline, so I'm going to keep it brief. First, I don't believe for a second that masculinity and femininity are social constructs. I do believe there are social trappings based on how we've been socialized that would impact how masculinity and femininity are expressed, displayed, etc. But as a world traveler, having been to 110 countries, women all over the world tend to have a very, very replicable, identifiable pattern to how they express their femaleness. Meanwhile, especially when unencumbered by politics and social media and, all of these postmodern influences, men actually, especially in developing countries, mind you, tend to have a pattern of how they express their maleness, which has caused me to conclude that masculinity and femininity are indeed the psychosocial ramifications of our male and female sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for centuries, men have been identified as the masculine people and women have been defined as the feminine people. One of the reasons I have the freedom to continue with perhaps such ostensibly archaic thinking is because I don't believe masculinity is somehow superior to femininity, such to the point where women should kind of wrestle it away from men and be the leaders and the powerful ones from now on, you know? I think the power actually happens to lie in the feminine. So in my thinking, as twisted as it may be, okay, and I'm open to you not agreeing with me at all, by the way, and you may also say, yeah, we're saying the same things in different words. That's fine too. But apart from there even being a psychosocial element to sexuality and how men and women attract each other heterosexually, I mean, obviously here, at least for the simplicity of argument, I'm being heteronormative, you know, mostly for the sake of convenience in this context. But indeed, apart from there being a psychosocial, even spiritual component to our sexual attraction for each other as men and women, it really is just reduced to physical urges. And I think most women in particular would be offended by that. Like, it's just, you know, you put the stick in the hole, you get off, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I think what gives wonderful depth and beauty and perhaps even divinity to our sexual energy as human beings is this polarity between the masculine and the feminine. So, you know, when you're talking about the creative side versus the logical side, I wouldn't see that so much as masculine feminine energy as much as I would see that right brain versus left brain energy. It's more of a gender neutral matter of innate talent and or personality type, that sort of thing. So whereas a left brain person may excel in STEM disciplines, you know, they're more mathematicians, they're engineers, more logical, etc. A right brain person would be more your poet, writer, speaker, or your artiste of whatever variety. So I see that as more of a human right brain versus left brain element, not necessarily being masculine or feminine per se. And indeed, maybe my own personal bias here against wanting to let my feminine side out is showing, right? By the way, I would always purport that my feminine side is a lesbian. That's one of my running jokes. But anyway, I don't typically feel like I'm in my quote unquote feminine when I'm speaking, when I'm writing, because I'm mostly a right brain person, but I don't feel like my life is lived mostly in feminine energy. Okay, so all of that said, so far, yeah, it feels like we're agreeing to disagree. But see, here's where you and I think, end up landing our plane at the same airport, even though we took off from different origination points. I do absolutely believe that the men are the ones who provide and protect, provide a safe space for femininity, which is where this joy, this play, this fun, this hospitality, the warmth comes from. And I believe that that feminine energy, that femininity, whatever you want to term it as, it's something feminine, right? That all is what makes this world a wonderful place. This is what we all live for on weekends. So that masculine strength, that masculine desire to protect, to provide, to be a hero, when it's in its healthy, virtuous state, you know, you're talking about unhealed masculine energy, which to me kind of, you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, is perhaps a euphemistic way to call toxic masculinity something else, which I greatly appreciate, by the way, because that's an overplayed, stigmatized description to begin with. And we need to move on from it, probably, if we're going to have a meaningful conversation such as this. But yeah, you and I are still talking about the end result of how this dance is danced in the same way. And so I want to go on record and say, I agree with where you ended up in your conversation. And to me, that whets my appetite for more of this conversation. So I want you to talk more to us, Delora, about how we decide, whether it's conscious or not. Talk to us more about how we as male and female human beings, well, for lack of a better way to put it, choose our energy. Or does it just happen? Is it unconscious what's going on there? I want you to tell me more about your perspective because I find it fascinating.
Well, I love that. And I'm so glad that you brought out that distinction and what your audience can expect from like where you land on it. And I don't see a distinction in the same way that you just described necessarily. So for example, I worked with one woman. She happened to be working with many engineers, and she was very right brain thinking at work. And she could take personality tests and get whatever they wanted, which is a very logical way of facing it. But
Yes.
what she found was when she went home and had downtime, she also ran a side real estate business. When she went home and enjoyed time with her husband, if she was able to, let's say, sexually fully release or enjoy being in her feminine, it drained her completely. And she'd avoid it for a couple of weeks because she would need a couple of days to recover. And so what we found was the reason for that is because when she was at work, she had to be so much in her masculine energy because she only worked with men. She was a very beautiful woman. She had to, one, make sure she was in integrity and the energy, they weren't hitting on her. She was in a place of authority, so she had to, boss a lot of engineers around. And so it required a lot of her logical thinking, get things done, be, done up, I would say, because I channeled for her and I pictured her being very done up, even though when I met her, she was, very femininely dressed and not as structured in her outfit, so to speak.
How would you define being done up?
Oh, just meaning like I pictured her in a dress shirt up to the neck and like a jacket on and
Gotcha.
very
Okay.
beautiful still, but very structured and, no skin revealing and whatever. And she goes, wow, how did you know that? And so even though that was her job, she enjoyed it. She was very good at it. She wasn't getting enough of the balance of the feminine energy, which is what she needed. Now, the same contrast, I was working with someone who he was very much in his masculine energy, very much masculinity was very important to him, was had moved out of a trade job into more of he ran a company then and had hired some women, and he was finding it hard to communicate with them. Before, he had only employed and worked with men, even though he was married and happily so. And what we uncovered was he had a line between at home, he could show up having fun with his kids and make jokes and whatever. But when he was at work, it's, men talk to men differently than they talk to women, not
Oh,
necessarily in a
absolutely.
bad way, but a lot of times men can be direct, get to the point. You don't have to necessarily consider how it lands with another guy. You guys can, throw back a beer or something and get over any disagreement pretty easily, in most cases. Whereas for a woman, sometimes the feeling that comes up with what was said gets in the way of hearing what was said, or we need a little more nuance around it, for example. And he wasn't able to do it at work, and he was finding that he couldn't. He said, "Well, I just can't work with women. That's it." And he couldn't look at it directly. It was too. He was getting too defensive. So I just started talking to him about what he does in his downtime. And he said, "Oh, I play with the kids." He had a hobby. And he said, "I really love playing music. I just don't get to do it enough." So I said, "Okay, what if you could tap into that this week?" And one of his kids had wanted to learn the guitar with him. And I said, "What if that was an option too?" So we did that. And the next week, he was able to talk to the women differently. And he said, "What the F did you do? We didn't even talk about this, but they're all approaching me differently." I said, "Because you were no longer focused and worried about the issue and getting defensive about how you couldn't communicate with them and women were the problem in the workplace and whatever story he was coming up with. He was able to tap into his feminine energy more and not femininity, not being female, just the creative flow of being into the music." And he hadn't done it before because when you get stressed or when an area of your life doesn't feel like you can work through it, the issue where there's a subconscious block or you just can't seem to get there. And he's like, "I can work with all kinds of people. Why can't I work with these women? What's wrong with me?" No, no, no. You stop your more life energy because your mind wants to fix the problem. It doesn't want to expand and see more options. It wants to deal with what seems like an immediate threat. So he couldn't creatively expand. So we had to expand that back up by just letting him tap into it. And the woman I was talking about earlier who had worked with engineers, it wasn't more sex for her that was going to work. It was how can you be in your feminine more often throughout the day, throughout the week, so that when you get to enjoy it with your partner, it's a full divine releasing experience between the two of you. It doesn't drain you for 3 days because your body has needed it for so long. And that's what happens. So and this could be a beautiful segue into something else, but the question was, how is masculine energy seen from the feminine?
Listening to you talk about all this, Delora, is very fascinating. What you had in the situation with both the woman and the man whose stories you just shared, which were great stories, by the way, resulted ultimately in a situation where neither the woman nor the man was making those who worked with them feel particularly warm and fuzzy about the prospect of working with them. So for me, this revolves a lot around the idea of safety and security once again. As you've already pretty much said, men are wanting to fix things. Men are wanting to find solutions. We're wanting to engineer stuff. Our desire, when well placed, the toxic version would be being violent and ugly to people, but that's a perversion of the virtuous masculine trait of being a hero, being a provider, being a protector. When we do that, women feel safe. Now, when the woman is at work and she's trying to, quote unquote, be one of the guys, I think men realize she's not one of the guys, but she feels as if she were to bring a little bit of the party and the fun and the joy and perhaps radiate that a little bit. The men would see her as weak or something. But then again, let's just talk about the case of the woman first. What's going to make the men feel more at ease? And yes, men need security too, in a different way from what women need. Maybe not physical provision of security and, being first out the limo and stuff like that. But men need to know that their masculinity worked, that their masculinity was welcomed by women, even if it's not in a sexual context. The best female bosses I've ever had in the business world were the women who, they were confident, they were strong, they could make decisions, they were smart as a whip, but they made me feel appreciated because then it's almost like I feel loved, weirdly enough. And that was something that a female boss could uniquely do as a woman. Whereas a male boss may slap me on the back and go, hey man, good job. Okay, you did good work today. Let's go get a beer. Yeah, that's a masculine communication. But were my female boss to try to attempt to communicate with me the same way a male boss would, and I know this is getting a little esoteric, okay? Hang with me here. I would feel like somehow that's coming off fake or stilted or, insincere, because after all, she's a woman. And I had that boss too, who was trying to be one of the guys, and none of us knew what was really going on in her head. None of us felt that she was really trustworthy. You know what I mean? But one of my favorite bosses all time, on the other hand, was actually a lesbian woman who had a lot of masculine traits, but she still loved being a woman and she really liked men. I, for what it's worth, think it's an absolutely horrible stereotype that people who are homosexual don't like the other gender. I think that's typically false. So she loved us as guys, and nevertheless, she had a maternal quality about her that made us feel appreciated and loved. She was older than us by at least 15 or 20 years. But her sexual energy, if at all, was often masculine as well. And it worked because, hey, she was allowed to be a woman. She was smart. She was successful. She made good decisions. That life energy you talk about, that's virtue. That's maturity. That's being evolved. That's life experience. That's wisdom. But her feminine energy was made available to us in a healthy way, and it made us feel safe. Like I said, almost maternal. Now, your male friend, I see this all the time. He's confusing macho with masculine, as if women are going to be impressed with, hey, y'all, watch this. And I'm real tough and I shoot guns and stuff. But in that context, women don't really feel safe and comfortable yet. It's the proverbial example of the military officer who comes home and orders his 12-year-old kid around. It's not going to work. That's not effective family building. The wife and the kids aren't going to feel loved. They're not going to feel provided for and protected. But when he comes home and he understands the feminine and he can instigate the feminine, that's when the feminine truly feels comfortable and safe and protected. So in other words, if I come home and I act all macho as a guy, I'm misunderstanding what feminine energy needed from the masculine in that context. If I truly am providing and protecting, then what I'm doing is I'm enabling that fun, that joy, and that play. And Delora, the guys hear from me all the time around here about how men are allergic to fun and we just think that's weak. And meanwhile, it's the guy who's helping women laugh and could have a little bit of a dorky side and yet still come off as if he makes decisions and he's got some kind of dominion over his own world here, instead of needing a woman to be his mommy and protect him and his poor widow feelings. That's what works. And it confounds a lot of men because to me, it's not necessarily that I'm tapping into feminine energy itself personally to enable the feminine to feel safe and comfortable. I think it's the true nature of my masculine energy, if I do lead, provide, and protect, to coax out that safe, non-toxic, healed, as you would say, version of the female energy. Am I making sense?
Yeah, for sure. So the first nuance I would just say, like for the woman I was talking about, the men actually really respected her. She just found it draining to have to keep a level of protection. So that's a really good nuance to the masculine energy. If they had been fully healed, she wouldn't have felt the need to protect herself in that environment and they would have had a different experience, but they weren't dissatisfied with her as a manager. It was just draining her personally.
I see.
She actually had a lot of respect, and at first it was tough, but they were like, "Oh no, this woman knows what she's talking about and she's about her business. We're good with that."
Okay, but hold on a second. I want to interject something because I'm agreeing with you. Of course, it's draining on her because it's not who she is.
Well, it is in like the way her brain works and everything else like that. So it's often easy to say, well, if the woman had done this or if she had shown up this way, then they would do it that way. And I think this is, a really great time for this conversation. As more men and women or humans take responsibility for their own actions, how they think, how they show up, where they're triggered, what they react to, how they see other people, where the judgments are, how objective they are. When you point one finger out, there's three fingers pointing back always. If you say something passionately about someone else, there's something about you that believes or rejects it about yourself. So the more we do that kind of thing, the more we can say, oh, if she was that uptight, let's say, or that drained after a week, what am I doing in the environment to make her feel like she has to worry about letting her hair down on a day or something? And there is more of that conversation coming out. That's why toxic masculinity, although it does exist in some extremes, just like toxic femininity does, nobody likes it when a female says that, but it's true. It does exist.
You bet
Those
it
are the
does.
unhealed parts of our society that we have to look at, clear up the shadow, be honest about, and then talk about how this shows up for both of us. And there's also something really important you said at the end there, where that is absolutely you showing up in your masculine energy and recognizing that you created a safe place for the feminine to come out that way. And also, you can also, or I won't say you, but the masculine and or the feminine or the male and or the female can still access that energy within themselves. That's why you can recognize it in someone else. It doesn't mean you need to operate from that. It doesn't mean that you are feminine by tapping into it. Recognizing it and being able to allow it to flow in someone else is a beautiful characteristic. And that is really great for the women around you because I'm sure that they feel that instantly.
Now, hold on a second before you continue with what you were just saying. The entire premise behind it would not be inconsistent with a statement such as, if you are truly left-brained, you'd do well to understand the value of right-brained people to a holistic world.
100%, because otherwise,
I think a lot of people don't, by the way.
right. And otherwise, the, true creative freedom, and I'm almost like I have 50 paintings in a year painted. Well, if I just keep painting and I don't do anything with them, I'm going to put up, 100 paintings on my walls and never paint again, and that'll be it. The masculine or the left brain or the structure that's needed, if I'm going to put it out into the world, and if I do want to be commissioned to do paintings, I have to have the plan in place to do that. For example, I need that as a woman just like I need it if I was a man or whatever else. So it's, we're applying concepts to a human experience, but they're really just definitions or ways to kind of lay out the discussion.
I see.
And if you're happier flowing in your left brain world, then let's promote areas where you can do that more easily. And that's where we're going to see more polarity come to the world, and we're going to see less of the contrast that doesn't seem to work, that makes people point fingers at the other side and say, well, you're too logical thinker, you're dumb. Okay, fine. Or or, oh yeah, you're too airy fairy and you can't make a sentence and you don't make any sense at all, kind of thing. Nobody hears what's actually being said in those cases, right?
Well, okay, so you're making a wonderful point, which is even if we're quote unquote healed, there are going to be a whole lot of people around us who push back and try to make life difficult for us and throw roadblocks up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's human nature. I think that's the experience of life. You're going to meet people who may even be to the point of not being worthy of being part of the adult conversation anymore, as I like to talk about around here. Here's a takeaway that might be interesting to some guys because this is the first time it's occurring to me, and I may just be thick-headed and everybody else has this figured out already, but here it goes. Okay, so I would hazard to guess that the same guys who are myopic, short-sighted, under-evolved, whatever you want to call them, okay, maybe they're just perfectly decent people who need to think a little bit harder. I don't know. But the same guy who, for example, would say, I'm an engineer and all these salespeople are just fluffy. I have no idea why we even need salespeople. I have absolutely no idea why they make more money than I do because all they do is sit around and talk about nothing all day. My goodness, just get in front of the customer. Go, okay, here's how the thing works. Sign on the bottom line, buy 100 of them. Cool. Let's all get paid, okay? That guy thinks that way. Meanwhile, the sales guys are on the other side going, man, these engineers have no social skill. I bet this guy hasn't been laid in 10 years. God, these poor bastards. Why can't they just get out of their own heads in terms of running numbers? And these guys need to relax and live a little, yada, yada, right? Well, everybody's right in that scenario, okay? Nobody's wrong. But I'll tell you, the successful people. Now, when I worked at Lucent, the absolute most badass people on the team were what Lucent used to call the Bell Labs field reps, okay? Bell Labs was where they were inventing crazy technological things. You can't even begin to understand what the patent says, let alone what the guy actually invented, right? These people were incredibly left-brained. Their brains worked like a technical steel trap. But these Bell Labs field reps, they also knew how to communicate with people. They had social skills. They knew how to make people feel good about themselves. They had a hypnotic way of speaking and understanding language and understood, how to be liked. Dale Carnegie stuff, right? And because they were well-rounded, my goodness, Bell Labs field reps were like unicorns. Give this guy as many stock options as he needs to keep him from going to the competition. So when we're kind of short-sighted, or dare I say stubborn enough to think, okay, everybody else's brain doesn't work the way mine does, so they're stupid. Well, if we're going to be that dogmatic and closed-minded about it, I think we're going to suffer the consequences. Socially, perhaps even sexually, financially, professionally, whatever. Because when we think if someone's not like me, there's something wrong with them, we basically have the problem. When we understand the value of how someone else is talented, what they're able to do, well, then we become billionaires like Elon Musk, right? Hire people who are smarter than you, right? Now, here's the revelation that's occurring to me right now. This is not unlike the sentiment of a macho guy who doesn't understand that women are going to be different. They're going to have different sensibilities. Different things are going on to quote unquote float their boat or light their fire. And unless and until he understands that, he's going to be single. And women are going to put him in the just be friend zone and roll their eyes at him because he just doesn't get it. So he may be the guy who goes, what the hell is wrong with this woman? Why won't she watch football with me on Sunday? How come she doesn't want to go, play in the mud and drive a pickup truck? What the hell's wrong with her? I mean, I got a gun collection. She should think that's amazing. Well, he doesn't understand the experience of being feminine, of being female, because he's too wrapped up in his own macho energy, okay? Whereas if you understand the dance of masculine and feminine, you understand women are different from us for a reason. It's a wonderful reason, and it's a reason we can dance with. So when we understand that part of our masculine joy in this life isn't that we have to deal with women, but rather that we get to interact with and attract women, and we are the leaders, providers, and protectors in a way that enables and celebrates that femininity, oh my goodness, women throw themselves at that guy.
100%. 100%. And even if the man who has this awareness shows up on a stage and needs to engage an audience that's mixed or all men, if he's showing up with that confidence and aware of both, because there could be some unhealed masculine energy in the audience who needs the strong masculine to relate to, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be able to get on the stage. And he makes such clear points. But the guy on the stage has the compassion and the openness to draw that out and make it safe that he shows up like that. It's okay if you're breaking down here, man. It's okay. You're in a safe place. He is tapping into that more life energy for the men, heterosexual, he's turning them on, but not sexually in that context, turning them on to more life so they can see beyond their current problem. And then that more life turn on, can go home and fuck his wife differently.
Oh yeah, you bet. And that life energy you're talking about is virtue. It's being of value to your fellow men. Check it out, okay? First of all, this is not gender specific. So guys, please don't feel buttonholed here, all right? This is simply my acknowledgement that most of my audience is male. But this applies equally to the feminine nature in its own way, okay? If there are women out there who just don't understand why we as men need to watch football, what the hell's wrong with us, right? Why don't we go watch a Hallmark, love, mystery, whatever thingy during the holidays with me? I mean, that's a woman suffering from the same myopia.
Absolutely, yeah.
People are stubborn about this, Delora. It's like, yeah, you know what? You sales guys are ridiculous and fluffy and there's no value to you. And yeah, y'all women need to pick up a gun, come out and go hunting with me because women are weak and there's something wrong with you. This machismo really does cloud us from, living our best life, because I don't think we really want to be isolated from other people who have other gifts.
Absolutely.
I don't think we really want to be dateless and alone. I just think that a lot of guys don't feel like any kind of vulnerability by any definition is a good thing. And so we stay bottled up.
Yeah. And we've also in some ways made that true by, if a man does break down or he is vulnerable, there's shame that comes with it from some people. And that's not okay.
Yeah.
If you're saying it's okay to break down and cry, then when a man does, hold the space and find out why, and then let him regain his posture, his strength, and walk away from there without the shame of having broken down. Because if not, then we're going to have a lot of these bottled up men that are going to stay in the toxic world and are going to pop off. And just like if a woman is always accused of being too emotional, but you're not hearing why she's too emotional, because a healed feminine is emotional, but not always out of control. If you think your woman is crazy, well, listen to what she's saying. Listen to the core of what she's saying repetitively, because she's telling you over and over. She may not be able to directly tell you what the problem is, but the theme is coming through. So when we're able to recognize that that's happening, that there is that extreme or that they can't break it down, it's to invite them into the other experience as objectively as possible and to call some of this stuff out. Where it really dramatically changed for me is a long time ago, sad to say my kids are all adults now, but I had 3 daughters first and then I had a son. And I used to always say in the car, girls rule, boys drool. And then one day I had my son and he was newborn and I said it and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. In my own head, I was like, oh no, boys don't drool, because it had a negative connotation. It was a playful nursery rhyme I used to say when we were kids. But then I recognized how that could be damaging to my son, the boy that I had, and I'm very proud of, just like I was as absolutely proud of my 3 daughters. And I changed immediately. And then from then on, it was girls rule, so do boys. And that's what it was from then on. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I have to look at all of this differently, because I was a very strong woman. I was a tomboy princess, I used to call myself. I did go hunting. I would do the fancy dresses. I've had a beautiful life where I've done both. To keep up with my dad, I had to be the tomboy, and I was just naturally a princess. But that allows me to see, how important it is hunting or sports or whatever, and appreciate it differently. And then, fast forward in my relationship, I was able to enjoy sports in a different way and and get curious. Why do you like it so much? And how much do you like it? And how do the stats work? And it just allowed my brain to see that differently. And it made it a more enjoyable experience later on. And I think the more we can do that, and the more men feel safe about asking those questions, the more that women feel safe to speak up for what they actually want, the more that that's going to come together, and we're going to experience more of that beautiful, healthy polarity. Because negative polarity exists too. And that's just to show us the contrast so we can come back to that healthy polarity that we all crave and want, really.
Yes. And I really appreciate your sharing your journey with us, Delora, because I think that's meaningful. It is meaningful, of course, it's yours, but I think it's really going to resonate with the guys listening. As you were talking to Laura, I'm reminded of how we feed ourselves such a logical fallacy to protect ourselves. We may already know or really strongly suspect that being closed-minded, by thinking that people are different in terms of their masculine and feminine, the right-brainers are different than the left-brainers, by shutting them out and ridiculing them and, well, dismissing them, whatever word you want to use to describe that, we really are only hurting ourselves. I think people really do realize that, but it's frightening to open up and be in a different place and perhaps not understand that world. And what you're punctuating so well is that there are huge rewards to be had if we relax into that and trust the system will, well, work, for lack of a better word. Because we really adore people who are accepting of us. We really do adore people who are curious about who we are rather than just dismissing us. So that's how human beings make friends. And in the case of masculine feminine energy, maybe to bring this full circle, it's how we as men and women attract each other. And it really is the only way to attract each other successfully. And for a lot of guys, it seems really complicated, but really it gets simplified greatly when we stop being so concerned about ourselves and protecting our position, and instead really reach out, take ourselves a little bit less seriously, and put ourselves in the place of a woman and figure out, okay, how can I be a hero to this femininity instead of being in self-preservation mode all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's first of all, anybody who does feel like they're in that situation, it's okay. Awareness is the first key to being able to make a different choice, because a lot of this is happening subconsciously, or even if we become conscious, though, there's also the trap there. I'm conscious I want to change this, but I don't know how, so I'm going to stay ashamed of it or keep it quiet, or I need to change it, so it must make me wrong or bad. Not necessarily. Awareness allows you to make a different choice. If you were somebody who did always think that feminine is weak or whatever that, contrast is, and very closed-minded about it, and now you have an awareness that you don't want to do it anymore, and you look back on some of the past ways you thought and you're a little bit ashamed of it or you feel guilty, own that, acknowledge it, look at it and say, but would I choose that now? Would I do that now? No, I wouldn't. So how can I be sure I'm not going to choose that? How can I be less hurt about the way that I used to act and how I want to be? How do I get there? All of that is the human experience, If, I always say, thank goodness I grew up before there was social media and before anybody could track what I used to believe and think out there, because I'm not the same person. I'm just not. And that is part of the human experience. So, men who are listening to this, and there are women out there that are ready for that evolution, and it's happening, and more men can find the women where it's safe to be vulnerable, and other men be safe to be vulnerable with other men and say this. And same thing for the women. Like, there are safe men out there. There is a lot of really healthy masculinity that is necessary and beautiful and a wonderful contrast to what we offer. And that is really where we want to be, is that healthy, beautiful, delicious polarity, that recognition of the differences in each other, and the common goal of, enjoying the time we have on this earth the best way we can.
Indeed. Truly, most men, the majority of men at least, are a lot safer to be in the woods with than a wild bear. For sure. Her name is Delora Guignon. She is the mindset mentor from Ottawa, Canada. And when you go to mountaintopodcast.com/Delora, Delora, you will be magically teleported to her Facebook page that you can join and find out all about what's going on in the world of the mindset mentor herself, Delora Guignon. Delora, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an extremely fascinating conversation and an enlightening one, I hope, for the guys who've been listening. And it's always a pleasure to have you back on. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott. This has been great. And I love connecting with men and sharing discussion like this. So thank you for having me on. I love it.
Oh, you betcha. You betcha. And gentlemen, if you have not been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, go there and download the free book, Sticking Points Solved. Get on my calendar to talk for 30 minutes about whatever you have on your mind. And if you want to get better with women, We can indeed put a plan of action together to make that happen, Captain, for you and your world. And while you're there, please visit our wonderful longtime sponsors, Jocko Willink's company Origin in Maine, The Keyport, and Heroes Soap. When you partake of anything from any of our three fine sponsors, please use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an extra 10% off. All of that's there for you as always, and so much more at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.